What a game. What a finish. Canada 3-2 over Finland in regulation after trailing 2-0 going into the third period. I mean, my goodness. That was 2-1 going into the third period. That was some finish. I mean, three consecutive goals by Canada, of course, right? Because that's what they've been doing. That's what they did in their last matchup against the Czechia against Team Czechia. So that was certainly an interesting development last time out with Canada, right? That they were up against it with Czechia, right? That was a bit unexpected. Czechia had a decent hand in that game, and now today against Finland, who by all means was one of the heavyweights in this tournament. Really handled Canada through the first 35 plus minutes, right? I mean, that's real impressive for Finland, but obviously Canada comes through once again. And look, as a obviously a fan of the Team USA, right? Being from the United States, obviously I want to see them in the gold medal game. United States plays later today, 3 o'clock. Still has Team Slovakia to get through, and that's at 3 o'clock. So between now and then, we are live here at the Devils Rink Report. My name is James Nichols, Devils beat reporter from New Jersey Hockey Now. Thank you so much for joining us on the Devils Rink Report today. Joining me in a few moments will be Jack Hahn of the Hockey Tactics newsletter. Excited to have him on, former assistant coach for Devils head coach Sheldon Keefe in his Toronto days with the Marlies. So excited to talk to him, get some insight there on a couple things that are, going on with the Devils and how these Olympic performances have unfolded. It has been really, really great hockey. Really interested to see how Jack's thought process is, or thought process goes on some of these positive performances by the Devils versus how they were playing back in New Jersey before this tournament began. It's real interesting. And you know what? He's here now. Let's bring him on. Jack Hahn, who is a former AHL, NHL analyst and a former assistant coach to Sheldon Keefe, like I said earlier, with the Toronto Marlies. And he writes the brilliant Hockey Tactics newsletter. I could not recommend it more. I find myself going back to it all the time. It's great for any new or veteran hockey fan, and I definitely recommend it. So if you haven't checked it out yet, please do so. Jack Hahn joins me now. Jack, how are you?
Well, super, right? So I grew up in Canada. I'm a Canadian, so very stoked right now. But also, you may not know this, but I went to middle school in New Jersey, so I was actually a Devils
Oh,
fan for a while.
wow, get out. I did not know that.
Yeah,
That's excellent. What part of New Jersey?
Morris County.
Oh, okay, so not too
So
far
so
from
funny
me.
so funny enough, I ended up coaching Kenny Agostino. And when I first met him, I told him that I used to live in New Jersey. He's like, "Oh yeah." Like it turned out, I went to school with his older sister. So
Oh, incredible.
so Amanda was in my year. I didn't. We weren't friends, but I recognize the name. So it's funny how like two guys from Mount Olive, New Jersey, end up on the Toronto Marlies together. But yeah.
That's incredible. What a great story. And before we jump into this, here, just talk to me about your thoughts on the game that just unfolded. How Canada overcame, and it seems like that's something that they kind of do, right? They fall behind, but always find a way.
Well, I mean, I think on paper they're certainly the best team in the tournament. Depending on how I feel about the U.S., but certainly they're 1 and 2. Finland's a great team. They play really well collectively. If you would have told me before the game that it was going to finish 3-2 and Canada would have doubled up on shots, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds about right. So, it didn't look good early for Canada, but at the end, I think what we expected to happen happened, which is they move on after a fight. But yeah, so we'll see what happens for U.S. and Slovakia in a bit.
Perfect. Thanks, Jack. We are having a little bit of technical difficulties from Nichols. This is really nothing new from him. We've had this happen
I'm
before.
back. I don't know what happened.
Oh,
Here
he's
I am.
back now.
Out,
Yeah, I
out
had
for out for a
filibusters for a
smoke
couple of seconds.
or a vape or something.
No, so sorry about that. So
No
just I
problem.
wanted to ask you, just going into later today, obviously, the US versus Slovakia. Slovakia has been a surprise, but how do you like US chances here to, advance the gold and everybody have that, anticipated Canada US matchup?
So, the U.S. has way more depth. I think if you go up and down the lineup, at a certain point, once the third forward line, third D pair gets on for Slovakia, I think, there's going to be a pretty heavy mismatch. Obviously, the goaltending can change a lot, but, you know, uh, when you look at least track record, the U.S. has an edge there as well. I think it'll be really interesting to see how Šimon Nemec does for Slovakia, just because I've watched him quite a bit recently with the Devils, and at the NHL level, he's still finding his footing as a reliable, everyday, top four defenseman. At the international level, he's done really well this Olympics on a team that I think relies heavily on him, and where he really doesn't have to worry about, getting glued to the bench if he makes a mistake, whatever. They need
Yeah.
every single minute from him. So it'll be interesting to see if he can elevate. Like we're seeing Uri Slavkovsky elevate his game, but he's only one guy, right? As good as he is. So I mean the U.S. are heavy favorites, but in one single game, you can never know.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to put a pin in Simone Nemeth. We're going to talk about him in a little bit, but I wanted to start here because you're obviously previously behind the bench with the Marlies, and Sheldon Keefe a bit here. But I want to before we dive deep into performances and such, as a former coach, right? I'm sure you saw the discourse on Jack Hughes missing those 2 games before the Olympic break, important games for the Devils. Where are you on that narrative that Jack, as a day-to-day player, it was kind of up to him if he wanted to play or not? Is that a bad look for him, or at this point, does it not even matter with how he's playing in Milan?
So the optics are certainly not great because it's the New Jersey Devils that are paying Jack Hughes a lot of money to play hockey, right? He may get a stipend to go to the Olympic Games, but he's mostly going there for the experience and for his own sort of, it's a bucket list item, right, to represent your country. So on the one hand, it's not great for the Devils and for Devils fans. I think understandably there can be a level of frustration there, but the way that I see it is, as an outsider looking at this, like this season is a bit of a write-off for the Devils anyway. And I think if Hughes goes to the Olympics, has a great experience, elevates, understands what it takes to win by, being in close proximity with some of the great champions of our sport, then that's only going to help the Devils in future seasons. I think as a long-term investment, if Hughes wants to go to the Olympics and maximize that experience, I actually see it as a positive for the Devils if you look at sort of the next 5 years. So I really would not make too much of this situation. It's not like having 2 more games of Jack Hughes with the Devils a regular season is really going to change all that much at this point. Obviously, the injuries are really unfortunate, and it really would suck for him to get hurt at the Olympics, for instance. But I just think, like, if you look at the great champions and the best players in our sport, they're the ones who have a history of, first of all, showing up at these big events internationally, but also performing. So I like to see Hughes being part of Team USA, and hopefully he can, acquit himself well here.
Yeah, certainly. And one of the things I think too is now, he probably went into this tournament too having a huge chip on his shoulder. That being because, well, we look at what he did last year at the Four Nations face-off. So, I mean, we see the difference here, right? It's kind of night and day. It's clearly a big difference in his ability to contribute. What are you seeing from Jack, and the reason why maybe this year has gone so much better than it did last year at the Four Nations?
Well, for him, it's always a matter of, physical maturity, right? Like I remember talking with Bryce Salvador uh, when Jack Hughes first broke into the NHL, and we're talking about back then struggling to drive play. He was putting up some points, but getting outshot very heavily. But it's just a matter of, it's a very big step to take going from the NTDP straight to the NHL, which I believe has never been done before. And now it's another big step to go from even above average or all-star NHLer to Team USA sort of mainstay, right? That's another big step.
Right.
And so I think just the fact that a year later he's a year stronger, a year better, a year more mature, like that's going to help. uh I think he would have been even better without all those injury setbacks, because when you're sort of at the very top of your game, any injury that takes you out for a week, it takes you 2 weeks to get back to where you were before, right? So it's a little bit unfortunate for the Devils that he just hasn't been as available as some of the other young stars in the game. But certainly, he brings a dimension where if, let's say later today, Slovakia somehow go up 1-0 and they get into a full sort of neutral zone trap, he's one of the few players who can go 1-on-2, 1-on-3, make something happen. On a team that's mostly, I would say, certainly they're great players, but they're more sort of dump and chase oriented. Like if we're talking about a Matthew Tkachuk or even Austin Matthews, who's not, I don't think, quite as good in transition as Jack Hughes is. He brings a dimension that I think is really will be really useful.
And what did you make of the United States keeping their top six from the four nations essentially together, but dropping Jack down to that fourth line with JT Miller, Vincent Trocheck, Brock Nelson? I mean, the early returns were obviously they were there, but was that a calculated thing for Jack per se, or was it a top six thing? What did you make of that?
I just think that, like, when you have sort of this wealth of choice, as USA and Canada do, a lot of times maybe it's easy to emphasize whether it's experience, whether it's physicality. You look at Jack Hughes, and I don't know, he's what, 5'10", 180, something like that. And you have the opportunity to have a bigger, stronger, heavier player who you think is almost just as good, even though maybe when you get down to nitty gritty, you'll see that Hughes has an advantage in terms of playmaking and hockey IQ and whatnot. But like, I'm not too surprised. But just as much as a lot of people didn't think Macklin Celebrini was good enough to be on Team Canada, today he was a huge factor. And I think if the U.S. find themselves in a tight spot where they need a goal, I think very quickly we can see Jack Hughes in the top six. Like that's an adjustment that takes no time at all to make.
Right, absolutely. You're listening to Jack Hahn of the Hockey Tactics newsletter. Be sure to check out his work over there. It's excellent stuff. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Super chat goal is open. Let's get some questions in here for Jack. But I want to stay with the success stories here, Jack, and just talk about Timo Meier, who was excellent for Switzerland. Obviously, they were eliminated 2 days ago, but he scored upwards of, I think it was 6 or 7 goals in the past what was it? I think it was 4 or 5 games that Switzerland got under their belt. So, I mean, there's an ongoing discussion that it's Switzerland's deployment versus how the Devils deploy him, right? Is it because he's on the right wing with them versus he's on the left wing with New Jersey? I mean, is it that simple as to why Timo Meier is playing better for Switzerland than he did with the Devils this season?
So the thing with Timo Meier, dating back to his time in San Jose, is that he's always been a streaky player. Like, he's a guy who I would say likes to force plays with the puck. And obviously, physically, he's very, very impressive. He's a very powerful athlete. He's on the bigger side for forward. And I think with Switzerland, he has this comfort zone where he knows that he's one of the few guys who can legitimately make a difference physically for his team. In terms of the Swiss roster, it's a lot of times it's sort of smaller, more hockey IQ or work ethic driven players. And, Meier comfortably has a place in the top six or on the top power play. So he knows that he sort of has a little bit more freedom to try things, and the teammates are going to be looking at him to do those things, right? Whereas I think at the NHL level, he obviously has had a huge season with San Jose before coming to the Devils, but it just seems like sometimes he can go cold for an extended amount of time, and that kind of plays with his confidence and maybe his coach's confidence as well, and that's why you see him sort of being moved up and down the lineup or moved off the top power play unit, and I just think as a player he has some very notable strength, which is obviously his physicality and his ability to drive to the net and shoot the puck. But in other ways, he's a little bit deficient. So all the things that Jesper Bratt or Jack Hughes might be good at in terms of playing East-West and having a little bit more nuance in the way that they play, like, I don't think he has that. And the Devils, for better or for worse, they're sort of committed to him long term. So it's just a matter of being comfortable with what he's good and not so good at. And I wouldn't really use his international performance as an indictment of what the Devils are doing with him, because honestly, the Swiss national team, in terms of quality of roster, is not an NHL team. So certainly Meier is going to get more opportunity. He's going to look relatively better because he's a go-to guy, even though he's not a go-to guy by merit in a lot of NHL situations.
Yeah, and I guess that's what you saw in San Jose when he scored that 40 goals. He was the go-to guy versus where he is now in the lineup with New Jersey, and it makes a ton of sense. Just because I that's kind of why they traded for him. They needed the goal scoring, right? They needed a power forward, somebody who was a bigger body too. And he is all those things. But like you said, he's very streaky. It comes in bunches and then it goes in bunches. So it's tough to it's tough a tough pill to swallow that he's the highest paid forward in New Jersey, especially in a season like this where the Devils are just decimated in the goal department. They really need them. But going to the blue line and sticking with the last success story we have here, there were a bunch, but these are the notables. Simone Nemec, like you mentioned before, he's had a great tournament in Milan. Can he be this guy for the Devils? Because I think this is what they saw from him before they drafted him. That saw him go second overall in international play.
So the thing is with Nemec is he plays a little bit different than a lot of other offensive defensemen. So whether we're talking about like a Cale Makar, whether we're talking about a Quinn Hughes or even a Luke Hughes, like those are players that are able to beat forecheckers with the puck on their sticks and able to carry the puck. And like most of what Nemec does to create offense is to activate as a non-puck carrier. So what that does is basically if his team is on offense, he's going to jump and become the fourth forward, and that can work very well. And certainly, I think Slovakia, they're well prepared and they understand that he's the guy to do that. At the NHL level, the problem is if your teammate turns the puck over, or maybe you get the puck and you turn it over, then the fact that you're up in the play also creates some defensive weaknesses. And in terms of again being an unbiased observer, Nemec has a lot of work to do in terms of his defensive play at the NHL level, which the same can be said about nearly everybody in his age group. Um, but that's why I think at the NHL level it's a little bit trickier because again, the main way that he creates offense for his team is to jump in. But by jumping in, you're also exposing space behind you. Whereas somewhere like a Cale Makar or a Quinn Hughes or again Luke, when he's playing great, they're able to carry the puck, pass the puck. When you pass the puck accurately, you're not exposing your team as much. You're not creating a numerical advantage, but you're not exposing a numerical disadvantage either. So you look at a lot of the best offensive defensemen in the league. They're both they're great carriers, they're great passers, and they're also good to great activators. But right now, Nemec's offense is mostly via activation, and at the NHL level, where you're not at maturity compared to your competition, that can open up some trust issues from the coaches.
Well, that reminds me a lot of another defenseman in New Jersey, Luke Hughes, and he's a guy obviously injured before the break, back on the ice now, which is good to see. He'll have to sit aside for a couple more games because of LTIR purposes. But a lot of question around should he have gotten the contract he did. I see it as it's a projection for what they think he can be. But what are your thoughts quickly on Luke Hughes? Just because there's a lot of question about can they succeed with him as the number one guy at $9 million? Because I think that's what they want him to be.
I think down the road they can. As good as he is, I think maybe he gets sort of a bad rap when you compare him to his brothers who are geniuses, right?
Right.
So, Luke is an excellent hockey player, physically, maybe even more gifted than his brothers, but in terms of quickly adapting to circumstances, maybe he's half a step behind. But again, when you compare him to most defensemen his age, like, he's way ahead. And if the Devils just sort of treat him as a stock and hold him, then I think they'll be pretty happy. Like I've talked about this a while ago with some people, but if ever there comes a day, whether it's due to salary cap considerations or other considerations, that the Devils have to keep one between Luke and between Nemec, I would lean toward keeping Luke. I just think that he ultimately, can develop into a more well-rounded defenseman than Nemec. But again, time will tell. But I certainly think the sky's the limit with him, provided that we allow the process to happen.
Yeah, certainly, and that's the key is right. It's a 7-year contract, so some patience is warranted here. He's going to be in the NHL, and they're going to try to ride the lows, but hope for those highs to break through as often as possible. We got a couple questions here for you from the chat that were kind of tied into my last ones here. But before we get there, I just want to touch on Jesper Bratt, who was our probably the only story in the Olympics that wasn't considered a quote unquote success, right? And again, there were dwindling minutes for him. Then he was a scratch. A lot of question as to whether this was on Jesper Bratt or if this was on the Sweden's head coach because of some puzzling decisions there. How did you see Jesper Bratt's tournament, and if it was his fault that he saw his minutes and time dwindle here?
I mean, based on the stats that I've seen, like in limited minutes, he was actually quite effective in terms of creating scoring chances. So certainly, I think he would have liked to have more opportunities, and I respect his game. I think he's 5-on-5. He's excellent. Even on the penalty kill, I think he has a dimension where he can stop plays, but also score the odd shorty to keep the power play honest. So I like his game a lot. Um, for Sweden, like the main thing that hurt him was losing against Finland early to affect their seeding because, the fact that they took US to overtime showed that they were right there, right? So, I'm in the past few days, like I'm seeing a lot of criticism, in terms of, how the players were deployed on Sweden, but ultimately, if not for their seeding, I think, they certainly could have contended for some sort of a medal. So, like whenever you have the privilege of coaching a strong team like Canada, US, Sweden, Finland, whatever, there's always going to be questions of like, oh, well, this player is being underutilized. And for Sweden, it was Philip Forsberg and Jesper Bratt, and, Hedman was hurt. But and I think that just comes with the territory when you have the benefit of coaching a strong team. Like, again, if you're coaching Switzerland, I don't think you're going out there benching Timo Meier no matter how poorly he plays, right? Because you know that on a given shift, he can do something that nobody else on the team can. So maybe that's going to fire him up for a good end to the regular season with the Devils. So, if he's coming back healthy and with the chip on his shoulder, then all the better.
Yeah, certainly. And this kind of leads me to, all right, let's look at New Jersey now, because there was all this success that we saw in Milan. And, then there's the question of, is this an indictment on Sheldon Keefe and his system? Is he the fit for New Jersey in the way that they're constructed? What do you think there in terms of the success versus the falters in New Jersey?
So even if you ignore sort of the Olympic performances, like I took a look at the way that Jersey plays and their deployment a while back, and it just, I find it puzzling that like they're not scoring because they're playing a bunch of guys who don't and can't score. Right? Like if you're trotting out like Luke Glendening, or Palada's not there anymore, but Stefan Neeson is a player I really like, but he's gotten slower and less effective 5-on-5. Like when you have a lot of these complementary players who can't score, obviously that puts more stress on your top players. And the thing that when I work with Sheldon in Toronto, whether it's with the Marlies or when he moved up to the Leafs, we try to get complementary players who can drive play and score the odd goal. Like in Toronto with the Leafs, we had Jason Spezza as our fourth line center. Then we had Joe Thornton, and and that, at least in the regular season, it took off a lot of pressure from the top players. And I just find that Sheldon has evolved as a coach for better and in some ways for worse, in the sense that when we were working together back in 2019, 2020, like I don't think he'd be the kind of guy to dress a Luke Glendening just to win faceoffs and to play the PK, right? Like I think like back then he was all in on having four lines that can drive play, that can score, that can make plays. And it's funny, like during training camp, he invited me for lunch and we talked for a couple of hours. And one of the things that I brought up is, if you look at NHL coaches, doesn't matter who they are. There are almost no exceptions to this rule, but the longer you work in the league, the more sort of calcified your thinking tends to become. So whatever criticism that we can sort of levy against Sheldon in terms of his choices or his philosophy, I don't think I would have done any better. I don't think most other coaches would have done any better, because when you start, having these heartbreaks in the playoffs and changing your way of thinking and playing a quote unquote less risky game that's more conservative, like that happens to everybody over time. And I think with the Devils this season, it's a good wake up call in the sense that I think they've kind of swung overly cautious, and they really should be getting more use, more speed, more skill into the system. Because honestly, like, when Devils fans ask me why the team can't score, I'm like, have you looked at who they're trotting out? Like, it's not a surprise, right? And there's also the factor of guys like Siegenthaler and Hamilton. They've been here for a long time. They've been effective players, but everybody gets old, right? So if you're with the team for 5 years, in year 1, year 5, you're not the same player, whether it's for better or for worse. So as much as Jack Hughes has improved from 1 to 5, other guys who are aging, they're going the other way. So it's just a matter of refreshing the roster around your core pieces like Jack Hughes, Luke Hughes, Jesper Bratt, you name it, right? Like I think the Devils are in a situation where I think if they played their cards right in a rising cap environment, they can sort of have a bit of a reset with a younger sort of supporting cast, and we're seeing certain players being developed, sort of moving up. Like, I think I really like Gritsuk's season, and I think Lenny is doing certain things. So I think they're trending the right direction, and I think it's a good wake up call in terms of recognizing when the balance has shifted too far.
Certainly, and it kind of seems like they need to be more like their 22, 23 selves as opposed to the 25, 26 team that you're seeing. Last one here for you. It's a kind of a two-parter from two chatters here. At Sonic9123 says, thanks for coming on the show. Keefe well. Do you see him changing his style of play to fit New Jersey's roster or sticking with what he knows and prefers? And then coupled with, do you see from Justin S7050, do you see a major difference between Keefe's Toronto system and what he's running in New Jersey, which is kind of a question that we asked, Tom Fitzgerald, is he running the same system that he was in Toronto, or has he changed it for his new roster here in New Jersey?
So the thing to understand about NHL systems is most teams will do similar things, and there's actually quite a big variation between your top 6 or your bottom 6 players in terms of their ability to execute and their ability to have a high enough success rate to make a play style viable. Right. So if we think back to, 3 years ago where the Devils were scoring off the rush, and a lot of that is just facilitated by the amount of speed and talent and youth they had on their roster. Right. So like as much as you can yell or tell or cajole, like you can't get Stefan Neeson to skate much faster than he does, because I'm sure he's trying his best. Right. And to the question about Keefe's systems in Toronto, like over the years, so the last season we worked together was 1920. And then after that, I sort of saw this evolution of, the team got more dump and chase. They got sort of more quote unquote gritty in the bottom 6, like less skilled players. Third pair D became more of a sort of a stay at home pair. And then the second pair became sort of a stay at home pair. And now you look at Toronto, they're underskilled and, they're getting shelled essentially. So the thing with that is, over time, I think Sheldon has gotten more conservative in his deployment choices. So it's not so much the tactical side; it's just the players that he's putting out there. They offer him something that he's looking for at the expense of something else that allows his team to play at the highest pace. Right?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense here, and it's interesting to see how the final 25 are going to go for New Jersey, because the odds are not looking very good. 2.something%, I think it's 2.4% to make the playoffs. The margin for them for error is thin. You wonder if these performances in the Olympics could kind of jumpstart them and put them, on a run, but it's going to require some luck from the standings on the outside of New Jersey. So, Jack, thank you so much for coming on today. What you do is invaluable, and I couldn't recommend your work enough. So, thanks for coming on, and we hope to have you on again soon.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, man. That was Jack Hahn of the Hockey Tactics newsletter, former assistant coach of Sheldon Keefe with his time in the Toronto Marlies. He was a Toronto Maple Leafs analyst, and just a brilliant hockey mind, somebody that you guys should all go and follow on Twitter if you are not already, and follow his work on his Substack. I mean, it's just, I find myself, like I said, going back to it all the time, just because, again, he puts into words so well on paper how systems run and certain players are deployed and stuff like that. And so whether you're a new fan or if you're a veteran fan, it's invaluable work. And if you're looking to educate yourself in the game, I certainly couldn't recommend that anymore. But okay, we are at the latter portion of our show now. So listen, guys, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, get them in the chat. Let's talk about it, because there is another game later today. We're going to wrap up hopefully by 2 o'clock here, and all sit down to view the USA versus Slovakia matchup. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the last few games here in the tournament, but again, we have our goal up. We have 5 super chats. We're 1 in already. Thank you, Sonic, so much. You're the man. But we have 5 up there for to hit our goal. And again, we take any and all questions and comments. So be sure to leave them in the chat. And if you're not already subscribed, I'd be remiss if I don't mention. Please do so. The sooner we get to 1,000 subscribers, we will be in your cars, on your RSS feeds, on your favorite podcast platforms, so that you don't have to look at this every day if you don't want to. You can listen to it on your drives and not have to be sitting held hostage to that YouTube app that you can't close because it's so fickle and annoying unless you pay for the extra, right? So listen, any questions, comments, concerns, throw them in here. Please subscribe to the channel and be a part of the community. But that is my spiel. Let's get to some takeaways from the we have a super chat. That's our new super chat sound, by the way, from producer Sean. He's got the Ric Flair woo in there for Sonic, throwing in that super chat from earlier today. So you'll hear that more often. Oh, we got another one from Sonic here. Another woo. You told me to ask you on Friday, what do you think? This is from Sonic 9123. Thank you so much again, Sonic. You are the man. You told me to ask you on Friday, what do you think about Nemo and how he's doing? Also, based off of his Olympic play, do you keep or trade for a big player? And that's a great question. And then Sonic follows that up with, "Oh my God, the Ric Flair sound." Yeah, that's the new addition to the stream, courtesy of producer Sean and working his magic in the background. So thank you so much, Sean, and thank you, Sonic, for the question and the donation. Very generous of you. What do I think of Nemec's play? I think he's playing fantastic hockey over in Milan. I think that you know similar to in New Jersey, he still has a lot of things to work on defensively, right? We saw him get walked against Sweden on that Lucas Raymond goal, and that was directly. Look, Raymond made a great play, right? And he's an all-world player. Obviously, he's playing at the Olympics in Milan, and for a really good team in Sweden. But Nemitz, could have positioned himself a little bit better on Raymond and kept him to the outside instead of letting him drive in and get to the net. So look, still some defensive lapses to work on with Simone Nemec, right? Certainly, but I am looking at a player in Simone Nemec for Slovakia who is playing with a whole newfound confidence here. Or maybe it's not newfound, maybe it's formerly found and it's returned, because he seems to do this when he plays for Slovakia, right? They put him out there in a major role. He's essentially their number one defenseman, playing top pair minutes with Martin Ferravari, the defenseman from the Washington Capitals. But he's the one out there who's on the first unit power play. He's the one out there quarterbacking. He's the one out there who's transitioning the puck with the top line in Slovakia. He's the one out there who is making the plays happen from the blue line, making them happen from the neutral zone, making them happen in transition from the defensive end. I love what I'm seeing from Simone Nemec. If he could just clean up those certain aspects of his game where he has to defend and he has to ensure that a goal doesn't go in when he's on the ice, then you're looking at a guy here who is a top pair player. And I think the player that the Devils certainly thought that they were getting when they drafted him second overall in 2022. So it's a great question, and like you heard Jack say, like, he's playing in this role where he's given this increased opportunity, right? Who's better than Simone Nemec on the blue line in Slovakia? It's nobody. And it's interesting to see that they're now boiled down to the final four, which is essentially the final three now that Canada won, right? And he's going to play top pair minutes against the US. We'll see how he does later. But the fact is that because he's been put in this elevated role, he's getting a plethora more of opportunities, and he's making more good than he is bad with those opportunities. So you would like to see him get those opportunities in New Jersey. I think certainly because Luke Hughes is going to require 2 more games to sit on the sideline due to LTIR at least, that you'll see Nemec maybe get some elevated minutes. I mean, you were seeing him get power play 1 opportunities over, Luke Hughes at some parts of the season when they were both healthy together in the lineup. And you saw what he did with those opportunities. I mean, a couple clutch goals from him earlier this year. And he made a lot of really good things happen for New Jersey earlier in the season. And I think that he's showing those tools that he started to show for the Devils now on the world stage. And like Jack said, look, he's just 22 years old. There's going to be growing pains with this player. I guess to sum up, do I trade Simone Nemec? I'm only trading Simone Nemec if it's for, you know, a Jason Robertson like return. And of course, it's not going to be a one for one swap. So don't clip this and say, oh, James said he's trading for Jason Robertson for Simone Nemec one for one. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're putting Nemec in a package with a couple other pieces to get a Jason Robertson, then yeah, that makes sense to me. If you're not trading Simone Nemec, then he needs to play top pair minutes or he needs to play elevated minutes, right? Maybe in the top four. But, you know, 18 minutes, 20 minutes a night works for me for Simone Nemec because you're seeing what he's doing with that now. He's averaging 22 against the best of the best in Milan. So certainly that's something I would look to do with Nemec there is if I'm a betting man, if I'm not getting a guy like Jason Robertson to help fix the scoring issues in New Jersey, I am not trading Simone Nemec unless it's a no-brainer. So can you trade it? Sonic says trade him for Quinn Hughes. Yeah, that deal I'm making, right? Of course, put him in a deal for Quinn Hughes. We'll see if that can happen. Again, I think I've been on the record to say I'm not very what's the word? Optimistic that you're gonna pry him, Quinn Hughes, out of Minnesota. I'm not saying never say never, right? But I would be surprised. Thank you so much for the donation, Sonic. That was a great question. Moving on, so the Jesper Bratt thing, um you heard Jack talk about it a little bit. And look, these things are in a vacuum, right? They happen so fast. The tournament is so short and there's such a quick turnaround. They got to a point where it was losing your out and they ultimately did. And look, it was a bad tournament for Bratt in terms of how he was deployed and Sweden's overall success rate here. Was it totally on Bratt? No, I don't think so. I think the game when it got bigger, it became a bit I guess overwhelming for Bratt, right? He is a smaller guy, but he's not afraid to use his body, right? He is a guy who will throw around the body and he will hit. It's a smaller rink here, so maybe he was pushed around a little bit, but overall, I mean, you look at the chances that he created. I mean, he out-created more than he was created against. So I thought he played rather well in his limited minutes. However, he was one of the few top guys because he was playing in the top six who didn't come through when they needed it. So, he unfortunately was the sacrificial lamb for, a Phil Forsberg to get more minutes. And then he ultimately didn't play in that third game. And then he didn't play in the play-in round much until the third period. He was stable to the bench for the first 40 plus minutes until he got a shift in the third. So he didn't have an opportunity at redemption. And maybe it was just a carryover from the poor season that's happening in New Jersey where he wasn't playing well then. He comes to Sweden who they by all means were top four in the tournament and they weren't playing well, and it probably just felt like more of the same to him where it was like, oh man, just nothing's going my way this year. Ultimately, I'm not overly concerned with Jesper Bratt. I think again, if we're looking ahead to what's going to happen, let's say this season's a wash and we're looking at next season, I think he'll come back fine. It's interesting to me, and it's something I do want to, dig into when I get back to the locker room and talk to him a little bit about, you had that shoulder surgery in the summer to fix something. You were playing great last year. Nobody even knew you had a problem with your shoulder. And then this year, obviously it hasn't been, and you haven't been as fortunate, but I think a lot of it, like Jack said, has to do with just the depth of the Devils. It's not as good as they anticipated it being. Which is interesting because Gritsia comes in and late addition and Lenny Haminaho, who's playing really well, but it's a heavy load on the top guys here who are just seemingly unable to break through. But we'll see what happens with Bratt moving forward. I think producer Sean, you have that graphic for Bratt and how he played, right? We got the quick Ric Flair woo button, but yeah. Well, so you see here, Jack Hughes is third in the tournament for chance contributions at 25.58, just behind Connor McDavid and Peter Cehlarik for Slovakia, and then you have Jesper Bratt who's fifth. Top five for Jesper Bratt. You have two Devils in the top five, and it's so interesting to see that because obviously that's the peanut butter and jelly right there, right? It's so interesting to see two Devils in the top five in chance contributions, but back in New Jersey they just can't score. Really makes you, and again, We've been talking about it for years now. That those two as a duo need a finisher on that line, and maybe all these questions will go away. And that's why we talk about, can they get a Jason Robertson for a Simone Nemec? That's why we have those conversations. Um, but yeah, so you see here the chance contributions are there, and that's the kind of player that he is, right? That's why I say Jack and Jesper are so similar. Obviously, one is better than the other, but they're both elite. And again, yeah, that's ultimately how the luck of the draw for Jesper Bratt has been this year, is just that he's creating a ton. He's just struggling to help chances go in or finish himself, and it seems to have carried over here to Milan. Um, and look, I will say too, he probably should have been given a better chance to redeem himself. He wasn't. Sam Hallam didn't give him, more minutes in the uh the playing round. He didn't even play in the third game of the preliminaries. So it was a tough tournament for him. We'll see how he does back in New Jersey. Maybe he'll be more motivated. Another player for Sweden, though, that plays for the Devils was Jacob Markstrom, who, by the way, looks like a goaltender. What do you know? Right? Now, is that discouraging or encouraging for Devils fans? I mean, I think it should be an encouraging sign, just because you can see what he's doing again against the top teams. And the other day, when Sweden lost in that overtime game to the United States, I mean, he made 38 freaking saves on 40 shots. He played really well against the US, who is, by all accounts, the deepest team in the tournament. So, that's again something. Pull up that graphic for Jacob Markstrom, Sean. Another encouraging sign for the Devils. And it's like, I say to myself, can the Devils go on a run here with all these positive performances? Look, fifth here in goal save above anticipated. Just behind guys like Giannoni, who, oh my God, nobody even realized how good he was going to be. Hellebuck, Saros, and the Slovak goaltender who's up there too, that not many people expected to play so well. But again, Markstrom, of the powerhouses, is playing really well. And it's interesting to see, because he wasn't playing this well before, and now he's playing excellent. So can he come back and help the Devils go on a run? Never say never. Nico Hischier and Timo Meier showed up despite a heartbreaking loss in overtime for Switzerland. Those were both two players for Switzerland. Obviously, they're top guys who are very effective, and like Jack said earlier, that those are guys who got a lot of minutes because they're the best players, and there's nobody better in Switzerland than those two guys, right? Obviously, there's Kevin Fiala, Niederreiter, Roman Yossi, all those guys. But those are the top offensive guys there. Dragonetto is another guy who plays over in Switzerland. I think he was really good contributor for them. But again, ultimately, Hischier and Meier showed up. Let's pull up that graphic for Hischier and Meier, producer Sean. And we got here, yep, another chance contributions in the tournament. And it is Nico at 9 within the top 10, and Timo at 12 with 24. So again, top 15 players in this tournament who, the best of the best minus Russia, are here. So it's again really encouraging signs, and it all comes down to deployment styles, and just who's going to be on the ice in the big moments. Like, obviously Meyer comes so close to the goal record. He scored so much in this tournament that it makes you scratch your head. Is it a right wing, left wing thing? Perhaps it is, because every time he goes back to the right wing, even though he tells us all the time, I'm comfortable doing both, he shows out on the right wing. So maybe there is something to that, and they should maybe try him over there. I could see a line of Gritsik on the left, Nico at center, and Timo Meier on the right, that I think, yeah, I could see some goals generated there. I think that sounds good to me, right? So you wonder if that's something that can come down the line. Um, and then Jack Hughes, he's been, let me mention quickly with Nico Hischier, he could just continues to do well on the dot, 53 of 91 draws, 57.61%. In the faceoff dot, excellent stuff from Nico. And then again, Jack, just one of the most dynamic forwards in the tournament. And look, hand up, right? I criticized him before the tournament, thought, maybe he should have played. But I hear the other side, right? I understand, like Jack said, like he knows the season is probably not going the way they wanted it to go. And it's only a positive for him to moving forward have been there and show out the way he did and improve his confidence to be among the best of the best in the Olympics. And being at that level and playing at that intensity can only be a net positive for him moving forward. I hear that side, and I don't disagree with it. So whereas, yeah, I do think that maybe Jack should have still played those last two games, despite, was he injured? Wasn't he injured? It's anyone's guess. I kind of agree with the Marchand thing, where it's like a guy like him knows that the Panthers are up against it and they need him. I don't say you should quit before it's officially over. Um, and I'm not saying that he did quit, but I'm saying that he could have probably opted to play those games. But again, I understand the other side. Go into the Olympics healthy, play against the best of the best, show what you're made of, regain that confidence, know that you can do it against the Finlands and the Swedens, which he certainly did and has, and he's been one of the best players for the United States. And I think that's honestly, you look at the four nations and who were the contributors there. It was largely the Kachuk brothers. Well, now this year it's largely the Hughes brothers who are playing so well for Team USA. Obviously, Jack Eichel is playing so well. Austin Matthews has been excellent. The Kachuk brothers too have been really good. So obviously those are factors, but when you think about who really stands out for the U.S. aside from the goaltending and Hellebuck is, yeah, it's the Hughes brothers. So I understand that. I do. Go get that confidence, play in this tournament, which you've dreamed of for your whole life, but you better come back as Jack Hughes, the one that we're seeing right now, maybe the one that we're going to see in an hour against Slovakia, right? So we'll see how that goes. Nemec we discussed. We can move on from that. We'll see what happens too with when the schedule resumes, which by the time we talk next week, it will. What happens with Nemitz? Is Dougie Hamilton still going to be there because the trade deadline's coming down in like 15-ish days. And by the time the season resumes, it's going to be much closer. Um, you know, there's a lot of questions as to how the Devils are going to be moving forward. Are there those rumblings that we're hearing true that Tom Fitzgerald's going to go for this big swing? Look, I warned against it. I could see it happening, right? Former colleague Jimmy Murphy, who's now on the sick pod with Pierre McGuire, put out that article via RG Media that he's hearing that, they're looking to make a significant change. And that's kind of, again, I know I advised against it, but one of the things I did say was that the Devils potentially need a shakeup here of the core, send a message, make the room uncomfortable, let them know that, anyone here is expendable and don't get comfortable because if you're not, shaping up, you're shipping out. And he listed Dawson Mercer as one of those guys who could be on the move. We'll see. Is he a core player? I would put him on the bubble, right? The core is probably the guys locked in: Timo, Jack, Luke, Jesper, Nico, who will need a contract. Those are the core guys, right? But I think that they wanted Dawson to be that. I think they wanted him to be part of that mix. But now, they need to do something different. So is he going to be on the move? Are they going to be able to bring somebody in? And then you look at the other guys, right? I think, you look at if the Devils are going to make a trade at the deadline to sell off some parts, then yeah, I think you need to look at, obviously Dawson Mercer can bring you back a big return. Dougie Hamilton, I think at this point you're going to get something good in return because he showed so well before the break. Cody Glass, 23 goal pace, 20 maybe 20 goals now. 20 goal pace. I mean, for a third line center, you take that, right? And I know he's shown great chemistry with, Haminaho and Gritziuk, and maybe you want to keep that as a third line moving forward. He has another year in his deal, so you don't have to trade him. But I mean, hey, if you get an offer that you can't refuse, or if somebody comes knocking and is willing and able to negotiate something for Glass that you're comfortable with, maybe you consider doing that and getting something significant in return for him. Can Jonas Siegenthaler, who played top pair minutes with Switzerland, and by all accounts, he was really good. Obviously, sometimes a team like Canada or who eliminated them, actually. I'm trying to remember who eliminated Switzerland. It was Finland. So Finland comes in droves, right? Mikko Rantanen, Sebastian Aho, all those guys, right? They took him to overtime, and he's on the top pair. And yeah, he had, he was out there for some of the goals against, but of course he's going to be out there for those moments because he's playing against the top guys out there, and he showed really well, Jonas Siegenthaler. So can the Devils get something in return for him at the deadline? Again, favorable contract, something really digestible for teams. It's not a pending free agent contract, so that comes with a couple extra years at a really good cap hit, really controllable. So that only drives the price up for Simone Nemeth. I mean, Simone Nemeth, sorry, Jonas Siegenthaler in my mind. So if somebody comes calling, yeah, maybe you make that deal. And another one I look at, you could end up doing this if he's willing to do it. I believe he still has a full no move. Brendan Dillon, right? If a team is looking for a little bit of grit, he's defended very well this year. If they're looking for a stay-at-home guy who's going to be really reliable in the, fourth, fifth, or sixth position on the blue line for a playoff run, maybe that's a guy that you consider. Is he willing to waive? You never know. We'll see. So, that's about it for my notes. We're at 51 minutes now. We'll take a couple questions from the chat, Sean, and then we'll go enjoy Slovakia versus the United States for the gold medal game sorry, not for the gold medal game, to get to the gold medal game to face Canada. Obviously, we're over here, Sean and I, rooting for the US, being from the US. But listen, I've really enjoyed, by the way, watching Slovakia. I think that they are really good. Juraj Slavkovsky has been really fun to watch. And great question here from Sonic9123. What do you think is making Slovakia such a strong team? They're aggressive. I mean, they are relentless forechecking on the forecheck. It is really, really stunning. And how fast they are, I don't think anybody expected. Obviously, they're getting really good goaltending, and they didn't expect to get this really good goaltending. I believe he's an Anaheim prospect, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a guy who you're probably going to see get, if he doesn't have already an NHL entry contract. But sorry, I'm not caught up on all the prospects out there, but they're getting really good unexpected goaltending here. They're a really aggressive forechecking team. The, Dalibor Dvorsky is showing up to be a player. I mean, I didn't know a ton about him with the Blues. I don't think he's playing like this with St. Louis. But him, Nemec, and Juraj Slavkovsky have unquestionable chemistry. They've kind of all played, and that's the other thing too, is that this Slovakia team has really played at every level together. It's been Tatar, Dvorsky, Nemec, Slavkovsky. They've all grown together over the years, whether it be the Olympics, whether it be the summer World Showcase, all of the international events, they've all played together and stuck together. So I think it has a lot to do with that. I think the evolutions of Slavkovsky, who is by all means an elite power forward in the NHL and has shown it now at a world level. The continued growth of Simone Nemec, who's playing by all means like a number one defenseman. Martin Feravari has been a good shutdown guy for them. Um, it's just again with how aggressive, how fast they can play, and how they can kind of clamp you down and curate that defense into offense. I think that's what's making them so successful. And they're not afraid to throw the body. Especially Slavkovsky, dude, he's a beast out there. I love watching him. I was thinking about this just on my own, if there was a way to somehow get Slavkovsky out of Montreal, but that would never happen because I mean, the chemistry with Nemeth is so obvious. They've connected so many times in this tournament, whether it was a goal or not. I just think they've been excellent together. So they've certainly put themselves on the map as a legitimate threat. Obviously, right? They're playing for the bronze medal game at least right now, right? The lowest that they're going to rank in the Olympics is fourth in the world. I mean, that's excellent, right? And again, You put an asterisk next to it if you want because Russia's not here. Regardless, it doesn't matter. You can only play who's in front of you. And Slovakia has shown up and showed out, and I'm very impressed with them. I think they've been great. So thank you for the question, Sonic. Let's take another few here, Sean, and then we're going to wrap it up and go enjoy the U.S. versus Slovakia. At Andrew Harvey 82 says, I think other teams' goalies and defense have figured out New Jersey's best players with less experience. Um, that's a good that's an interesting point, I should say, because I look at a guy like Haminaho, they haven't figured him out yet. And are they going to figure him out? I'm not saying that he's, a cookie cutter kind of player where they're just going to be able to understand the kind of player he is and shut him down. I think he's a little too smart for that. But I look at a guy like Gritiuk who continues to get it done as well. He's been a bit snake bitten. I don't think he's scoring as much as he should be. Um, but in terms of what their issue is that, kind of like Jack Hahn said earlier with us, the Devils' bottom six just can't score if it's not the glass line. And they can't score all the goals, right? So when they're not scoring and nobody else is, I mean, it's just really difficult to generate that offense, right? They're shutting down the top six. They're really just taking them out of the slot areas. They're taking them above the dots and outside the hashes, and those are areas that you can't live in to score goals. And that's what's happening for the Devils' top guys because again, they are able to shut down the top guys. The bottom guys don't have the goal scoring touch, and ultimately it's less about the um players with less experience not being able to make it happen, and it's more about just not having the depth. It's unfortunate that the top guys are just when they're not going, nobody is, right? And again, you need a stellar game from the glass line for New Jersey to really go. Otherwise, you're not having a good game at all. So, and look, a lot of it has to do too with how the Jack Hughes situation is, right? He's a major factor in whether the Devils succeed or not, because when he's not playing like himself, he's a bit easier to shut down, right? If he's, unable to play make, if he's unable to score those goals, right? And that's that's the heart of your team. That's the heartbeat. That's the engine. And when it's faltering, the rest of the lineup is going to falter too. So, um, yeah, when Jack's not going, the rest of the team isn't going. You get really good, stints from the glass line, but ultimately it's a depth thing. Um, and they got to figure that out. You know, does it take one trade to put all the cogs in the proper ignition for the Devils, where they get a top six guy to play with Jack and Bratt, preferably a goal scorer? And now everybody's moved down a notch in the lineup, and everything fits. Maybe. Do I think they need more from the blue line? I do think they need more from the blue line. I mean, eh, I don't. We're gonna talk about this again when the season's over, but Quinn Hughes just would have fixed so many things for the Devils, and you're seeing it in Minnesota. You're seeing it with Team USA. I mean, he really would have. He would have fixed so much for the New Jersey Devils. And again, do I think there are hope? Do I think it's hopeful that the Devils can get him at this point? I don't, but again, never say never. I'm not going to count anything out, but I do think it's certainly there's less of a chance now more than ever. So we'll see how that goes. But Quinn Hughes certainly would have fixed a lot for the Devils. And I think the last one here, and then we're going to wrap it up, from Christy97 says, do you think Hischier and Meier look better defensively during the Olympics than they have during the Devils' season? I hope Keefe puts them back together as line mates. That's a good question. I don't know that they're better defensively. I think they're always pretty good defensively, right? Like Meier can skate really well, right? He's a north-south kind of guy who gets to his positions, and he can put the body on, a puck carrier, and take the puck away. And Nico, I think, has always been that two-way guy. So I don't think that they're playing better necessarily for Switzerland than they were in New Jersey. I think there's just more opportunity because there's no Jack Hughes, stopping a Nico Hischier from playing 25 minutes, right? There's no Jesper Bratt stopping Timo Meier from playing 25 minutes like they are for Switzerland, right? Those are the top guys. They're on the top line. And the top line, regardless of what it says on paper, is typically going to be Jack Hughes and whoever's playing on that line. They're going to get the most minutes. Um, so no, I don't think that they're playing better defensively. I think they're always pretty good defensive players. I just think that the opportunities are there for them way more than they are in New Jersey, just because again, there's no Jack Hughes to try and take those minutes from, and they're not going to. So, and you see it, like you see whenever Jack goes out, it's always Nico Hischier who's stepping up, and at some point, Timo Meier comes alive and scores a bunch of goals, right? And he's a streaky guy, so it doesn't happen every time. But ultimately, I do think it is Jack Hughes. It's Jack Hughes's team that is, again, you're not going to take those minutes from him, and that's why you're seeing more out of the other guys at the world stages because they're the top guys for their respective countries. So that's my take on it, and that's going to wrap it up for today's I almost said February 20th edition of the Devils Rink Report. I am your host, James Nichols of the Devils Rink Report and New Jersey Devils beat reporter via New Jersey Hockey Now. Please leave us a like and a subscribe on the video today. If you liked this episode, there's more every Friday where that's coming from. Typically at 3:30 today was a special circumstance because of the Olympic schedule, but next Friday there's no more Olympics. So just be sure to like the channel, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hit that bell for notifications every time we go live. There will be more great guests ahead. There is a lot more Devils hockey for the next 2 months to talk about. So we have about 8 of these actually left to go, maybe a little more than that, depending on how the weeks fall. And hey, if they somehow squeak their way into the playoffs, we'll be going live then too. Then we have, free agency, we have the draft, we have a bunch of things to still go live for. So more or less, looking at like 15 more episodes at least for this season. We'll see what the summer brings and stuff like that. I know it's, the Olympics are still going. We haven't even hit the gold medal game. So what is James talking about? Just looking at a little bit into the future, right? And seeing what's ahead for Devils Rink Report, what's ahead for the Devils, what's ahead for us as a community, as a channel at the Devils Rink Report, right? So again, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and again, the more you support us, the more we can provide for you. I see the thank yous in the chat. I really appreciate those, and we love doing this for you guys every week. Everybody give a nice thank you to producer Sean for the woo button and all the graphics and the nice producing that he does. And for some reason, when I drop out of an episode for like 2 seconds, he pops in and buoys me there. So thank you again for that, Sean. But until next time, guys, let's go Team USA. 3 o'clock puck drop against Slovakia, and we'll talk next week.